As you know, the theme of this day is challenge our challenges. Do we need to question the questions we're asking when trying to solve the huge problems we have ahead of us, like climate change, or planning a sustainable city, or lowering the cost of healthcare and taking care of our aging population? What can we learn from the developing world, like Dr. Chetty's high-quality, low-cost hospitals, or the favela in Brazil, where Mr. Brillembourg is trying to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor part of town? What do we need to find new solutions to our problems, solutions better than the ones we have today? And how much is linked to how we think and how we look at the world? Well, I know these are huge questions for sure, and our guests today, they all represent different aspects and different disciplines. And I'd like to try to make this panel a little bit like a think tank workshop. So please welcome back on stage all our participants. First, our three professors, Jaideep Prabhu, from University of Cambridge, Weinberg from Hasso-Plattner Design Thinking Institute, and Marina Ranga, triple helix expert at Stanford University. You can take a chair and put yourself in comfortable way on stage, and then welcome architect Alfredo Brillembourg from Urban Think Tank in Switzerland, and Dr. Christina Agapakis, who you just met. She's from the Art Center College of Design in Los Angeles, and Daisy Ginsberg from Royal College of Art in London, and Per Hedberg as well. So do we have a chair for Mr. Hedberg?
No. I stand.
Oh, we can get you a chair, right?
No.
Somebody, could we organize one more chair? Yes, thank you, great.
Short chair.
There's always some practical problem to solve, but we know.
We'll put the incubator in the middle, because
yes,
we need him.
But the chair is much smaller, so that will look funny.
Put the incubator in there. I sit here in the back then.
Oh my goodness.
I think I stand.
Here's the cash.
Yeah, that was like one of those techniques where you put somebody below you. So, I mean, we have a bunch of brilliant minds here all gathered today, and I know these different aspects and so on, but from your aspect and from your ways of looking at the world, what do you think? In order to solve our problems, are we challenging our challenges enough?
Are we solving our challenges?
Are we challenging our challenges enough? That's the theme of this day, and it's a funny question maybe, but...
I don't think so. I think this is a very unique, event, actually. You're much more likely to hear, let's all get together and talk about the challenges and how we will solve them. You never have that kind of reflection on, are we asking the right questions? Are we looking at it? So I don't think that we're doing a good job yet, but this makes me optimistic.
So I know you, Daisy, you worked a lot with these questions. What do you think of this?
I mean, I agree with... Is this working this time? Yes, I agree with Christina. I mean, I took part in a conference a couple of years ago called the Grand Challenges, Global Grand Challenges of so all the 6 big problems for the world. And in a way they become interchangeable because they're just, each one is so enormous and intractable. And it is about this kind of crossing between different disciplines and finding different ways to find connections. And that is through a process of questioning and working out which partners could actually work together to find those new solutions as well. So, I mean, I think that just saying, well, the problem is sort of water on its own, or the problem is medicine or healthcare. Again, it just offers you're just asking something to be solved, but then you'll solve it in the wrong way.
So interconnectedness. Do you agree?
Well, let's take on the last presentation, which was the incubator, right? Important. That's the one that's actually going to bring all of our ideas to some kind of market scale, right? But the problem is, and Acumen Fund will tell you in the issues of poverty and stuff, is that no one wants to fund the initial idea. Everyone wants to fund when the idea is pretty mature. There's a business plan. There's actually maybe even a prototype. But there's 1,000 ideas I've come across in universities and students and whatever that that no one wants to give them the funding to take it to the next level when it can receive seed funding, incubation funding. So there's a real gap there, and in where that seed funding. Why? Because I mean, in Acumen, so I won't refer to your organization, but Acumen in particular will only get impact investing funding in a product that they see will have a return. A clear market return, even though they're going to ask for less interest rate and less because it's an impact investment, right? They need to have, so Bill Gates is mosquito nets in Africa or something like that, because so they start up industries to produce those mosquito nets. But you know, we need funding at the very initial idea so we can go play around. Who's going to give us that funding?
Marina.
Yes, I'd like to give one example about this situation. Some of you may be familiar with the StartX accelerator at Stanford, which addresses exactly this problem. The StartX is a business accelerator entirely run and created by students. The problem originated in the OTL, Office for Technology Licensing, approach to this idea creation by the students. They thought not only the ideas are too early and too difficult to work on because they would be too expensive to develop further, but also many of those student and student firms wouldn't allow or wouldn't agree to pay them the 8% overhead. So StartX was created by a graduate student. He was actually taking a leave from his PhD, and he organized this network of students, alumni, and investors in order to invest in student-created firms. It was an initiative that initially was not credited with any chance of success, but only in a very short span of time, it got, I think, a 1 million grant from Kaufman Foundation. And now it has become a model that is trying to be publicized across the United States. So this is, the business model is that they accept 4 series of companies that are being incubated, given advice and management and business counsel and so on. And during this program, they have high exposure to VCs, to business angels and venture capitalists who are willing to invest in that. So that is the answer to your question. And there is a quality guarantee there because all their ideas are generated by Stanford Research, which is of high quality.
And here you're addressing something. You say, you give, Alfredo brings it up and you say, well, there is one place that does it, but maybe it's just one place. So then that brings me on to the thought of innovation systems. Do we have enough innovation systems to create solutions to our problems? Per?
Well, in Sweden, we don't have an innovation system. There's nothing like an innovation system in Sweden.
What would you call an innovation? What is it?
Some of you are engineers, I assume. A system is something that is composed of components working together to achieve a goal. That means that there's some sort of architect or designer that have designed the system with the components working nicely together. That we don't have in Sweden.
But I know you have an example. There is one country that you know of where they have actually put a system in place. How is that working for them?
Well, I mean, to have a system, you must have some sort of architecture, and somebody have thought, these are the challenges, and here are the measures how to address these challenges, and then you put together some sort of system in the ideal world. But in Sweden, we have an overlaid system for 30 years that the politicians have dropped down bits and pieces, and it's sort of a total mess. But some countries have tried to do more cleverly than that. And one interesting country that have really done that, but from another perspective, is Israel. They have, at least from their standpoint, tried to design actually a system from 1992, which is pretty interesting. But not many countries have done that.
Is it working? The system there?
Well, it depends on
because I know you think that the Swedish government that they are putting billions into startup and
too much.
Too much.
Far too much.
You say we could do with much less if the system was better.
Far too much.
Uli.
But I would, if I would address that from the German perspective, I could actually probably say the same thing. there is no structure in Germany to nurture innovation. There are a lot of tries. Every Bundesland, every country tries different things. But I would like to frame it in a different way. Probably we don't need that. Probably we should just have access. There is a system, and the system is called the internet. And this is a global system. So and just access the internet and use it. I have a little thing here on my wrist, the Pebble, which I think is a great example. And there were some guys coming up with the idea using that display, which we all know from the e-books, for a watch some years ago. And they were putting this on the internet as an idea on Kickstarter, on the platform. And then they were asking for $100,000 to get as an investment, and they got 10 million. That was the big story for Kickstarter for that platform, and they got it from tons of people, from a lot of people investing a little portion, and there was no system, there was no country behind it. It was just the wish of some people to own that. I was one of those stupid guys to invest a little bit. I waited for 2 years to get the watch, and it was actually illegal to buy it in Germany, crazy enough, because they forgot the German version of some certificate, and so you couldn't buy it.
Jaideep,
but let's make use of this kind of systems, and this is what I'm asking to constantly try to rethink the way, get out of the structures, get out of the normal things, and try to find out new ways.
Do you agree, Jaideep? We don't need a structure.
Yeah, I'd like to riff on that, if I may, because I personally have a problem thinking big. I can't think big challenges, they just boggle my mind. And big solutions, especially coming from on high, boggle my mind. What inspires me are people in local situations solving local problems, which then could lead to a bigger solution. So I'll give you an example, and I like the idea of the connectivity angle. Because the problem, if local people are solving problems that are not connected, then you can't have a bigger solution. And this happens in lots of countries, including countries like India. Farmers will solve problems in their farm, in a village, and sometimes come up with ingenious solutions, which farmers in the next village will not know about, so they can't learn. But now you have devices and technologies, very cheap ones, and organizations that are using these to help connect these farmers so they learn from each other. There's an organization called Digital Green, interestingly spun out of Microsoft labs in India. And Microsoft didn't know what to do with this technology. This company now, what it does is, they go from village to village, they record farmers talking about their little things they've done in the soil or with fertilizer or managing water or whatever. And they've got a massive repository, you can watch them on YouTube. Some of them are very boring. But other farmers find this interesting. And they take this little device from village to village, and they have an evening session. They broadcast it on the wall, and people sit around, and they talk about, oh, people like us have done this in the neighboring village. Maybe we can do it. So those are the kinds of things that inspire me, because I see it as a very different way to address the challenge. It's bottom up, but not bottom up in the old way because people were just unconnected. Now you have means to connect people. And of course, in the West, you have the internet, and you have all that kind of stuff happening, and crowdfunding and all that kind of stuff. But that principle of local people solving local problems and then sharing the ideas so that these bigger challenges are solved bottom up. The top-down solutions are very difficult to make traction. Look at the attempts to solve climate change. They've got stymied in political issues.
Daisy?
I think it's important not to talk about innovation just in economic terms, because otherwise if you talk about it in terms of startups and how do we fund sort of innovation as invention, that's not to me what innovation can mean. And I think what you're describing is actually, it is technological innovation, but it's not necessarily in terms of economic metrics of to start a company out of it. So the question goes back to what you were saying, how do we just fund kind of research, and how do we fund ideas that won't make money but could make things, could improve a city or help address these challenges, and what are those things? Is it about, like the project that we both experienced that opened up this whole network of different ways of thinking for so many people that has no economic value at all, but inspired so many people and so many students around the world as a result.
I want to add to that because maybe we should challenge our idea of what innovation means in general. Because California has these blooming infrastructure around startups, and a few people, pockets of people, are getting super, super, super rich off of it. And meanwhile, the inequality in the state is like being, you know, huge wedges driving between like those rich people making a lot of money on startups and everybody else. And then when we're talking about infrastructure and where a lot of innovation comes from, the University of California is crumbling, and there's very, very little funding going to the university. But there is a lot of interest of getting companies to spin out of the university without a lot of like interest in putting money back in to educate people, to like build a community around intellectual life or whatever, right? We know it's all like, how can we make money off of this? And I think that's very limiting and very damaging. So yeah, let's challenge what we mean by innovation and where that can come from.
Marina?
Yes, I'd like to come back to this idea of innovation systems, because I just simply cannot let that go without reminding that the theory of national innovation systems is a foundation stone of innovation studies. And it was actually a Nordic Lundvall, Bengt-Åke Lundvall, who promoted that and in the 90s, and then it was embraced by the OECD, and then it was embraced by governments, and it has become the foundation, the pillar of innovation studies. And for many years, all the measurements of innovation and research performance has been done nationally. We have national innovation indicators. Okay, there has been a lot of criticism to the national innovation systems theory, and then we have moved on to the regional innovation systems theory, which moves the reference unit to the regional unit in the sense of, you know, the EU speak with the NUTS 1 and NUTS 2, NUTS 3 territories and so on. But then again, most innovation processes are more visible at the regional level, and as within countries we have a lot of inequities and gaps between regions, then you cannot make overall assessments at the national level without taking into account regional performances and so on. But again, there is a very clear systemic view on innovation. We have a narrow view of innovation systems in the sense of universities interacting with firms and knowledge producing end users. But then we have a broader view of innovation systems where you have universities and companies and governments and banks and spin-offs and all these social institutions, you know, triple helix, quadruple helix. So the systemic view of innovation is very, very important. We are still struggling with that. You know, we still do not understand very well, or we could not capture very well what's going on. But the systemic view is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let's address that for this. So in the city, let's say, which was my topic, why don't we have an experiment? Someone do a city, municipal land should say this zone is a pilot project. Let's do a cooperative. Neighborhoods get together, they design their own building. You know, why don't we have experimental zones? Like, okay, innovation labs. Okay, let's give this clinic out of regulation. Fine, but let's experiment. Let's measure the experiment. But I think innovations measured on that OCD level is all based on patents. And patents are not the best indication of innovation.
Not necessarily. No. There are 28 indicators to measure innovation.
Let's not get stuck in a discussion about talking just about the systems, because I'm thinking if we are to solve the big challenges of society, do you think that will come from above with the systems that we're discussing now, or will it more be a movement from underneath, or will it be a combination that we need to open up for?
Could I just, on the point about communities, I'll go back to that example I gave about Barcelona, and many Spanish cities, not just Spanish cities, other cities, now have fab labs in the cities. And in Barcelona, the vision is to create several of these fab labs, a bit like this lab, in different communities, where people in the community can get together to make things together, to solve problems locally. And the example I gave, I went through it very quickly, was one such example. This idea was germinated within the Fab Lab, this particular Fab Lab in Barcelona. They developed the solution in the lab, made it in the lab, and now they're selling it from the lab to people in Barcelona. So anyone can now buy this device, and one part of it goes outside your window, and you sense, you know, things like pollution in the air, noise pollution, temperature, all this kind of stuff. And the other bit goes into your computer. You know, there's a low-frequency radio signal that sends the information. And then this goes to a central server, which is basically an iPhone, that records the information from several people. So it's completely decentralized. And he was saying the idea is to completely change what's currently done, where the city will contract with a big company, I don't know, Cisco, IBM, to have this very expensive equipment that will sit in one place, usually in a park where the air is quite good, so they can claim that the city is clean. this is a completely different approach. It's much more frugal, it's much more decentralized, and according to him, it's much smarter because that's how you should be sensing the air in a city, and it gets people engaged in their own problems, and then they can lobby their local government and say, look, on Thursday night, it's much noisier in my part of the city. Why is that? What's happening?
No,
and
that's
so
a good point. I want to bring that up. Cisco, Google, all of them, right? They're all capturing now city as a business, right? They all want to get into the business of the city. So they're going and lobbying mayors and getting in on this intelligent city, smart grid thing, right? And they're selling it, and they're going to sell it to Mumbai, and they're going to sell it to everywhere, when not necessarily those are the right tools.
They're not the smartest. Actually, they're not the smartest. Centralized is not the smartest.
That's the point.
That's the point.
So, but back to my question then. You know, when we look at the really big challenges, is the solutions going to come from these top meetings that we have all across the world about the climate change, for instance? Are they going to come from underneath, or is it a combination of top-down and bottom-up perspective?
Of course there's a combination.
For looking at what is happening today here, the opening session of the OpenLab, this, what you are starting here, could be a very, very good example for a lot of other cities. I think we need many more of these kind of locations where people can meet in an open way. And it's not just theory. What you're addressing is, in theory, everything is fine.
No,
we know this since 50 years, that everything is fine. Theory is right, you're right.
You cannot just discard
the issue. But to practice things and to get together people in a Fab Lab mode, and not just technology, but also in a kind of new mindset, new gathering, new way how to solve problems, and to beneath those spaces, and we need many more. And I'm telling already since I know about, since I met Eva first time, I'm telling when I'm giving talks in other cities, and I'm talking about this, what you're setting up here, and it's usually they're saying, wow, it's interesting. There could be something for our city as well, you know. And I'm wondering, why are they not there? Why are not hundreds, thousands of places like this? And we need the spaces. And this is the place where the things will happen, not above there. No. They will come here, they will listen, and they will look.
Do you disagree, Marina?
No, I just wanted to bring one example. This is about the so-called civic innovation, which is a sort of latest trend in innovation. You know, innovation moving from the firm-centric view, everything revolving around processes within the firm, towards the social dimension and economic applications. Okay, and now the latest layer added to that is this civic innovation. And I just wanted to give you this example, which I really find very interesting and really worthy of being replicated elsewhere. It's the idea of creating the job of Chief Innovation Officer at San Francisco City Council. San Francisco has become the second city in the United States after Philadelphia that created this job. It's called the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Civic Innovation. And they are doing excellent initiatives across different areas. I have here a list. They do, for instance, a Civic Innovation Spotlight series where they address creative issues. You know, mayors' innovation roundtables, perhaps the mayor of Stockholm will like this idea. Open law, San Francisco Open Law, where they help citizens to understand the laws and the legal system. Living innovation zones, where they try to improve public space with creative projects and innovative technologies. And finally, entrepreneurship in residence, which is a way of helping entrepreneurs to develop products and services for the 140 billion public sector market. So they are trying to leverage the power of the technology community in Silicon Valley, San Francisco more precisely, to work for the citizens, for the elderly, for the schools, for minorities, and so there is a lot of interest behind that. There's also a lot of capital. There are about 850 members of this, and this works very well.
Daisy and Christina, I mean, you're the youngest ones on this panel, and you also represent this generation that might be hit the worst by the challenges ahead, maybe, or your children will be. Do you think that our way of looking at the challenges today are the right one? Or have we put on the right kind of glasses when we're seeing them?
That's a big question.
Yes, I know. I'm here to ask all the hard ones.
I mean, I think it's easy to point at, well, it's like, okay, climate change is a problem. It's going to affect us and our children a lot, and continue to affect us. I think, Yeah, maybe it's not. Yeah, so like that one's an easy one. It's like it is a challenge, but the kind of specific parts of it that we can grab onto to make changes, maybe those are where the challenges are. Yeah, whether it is top down, whether it is bottom up, those are that's where we can have that discussion.
But there's something in Silicon Valley, right? It's called solutionism.
Oh yeah.
What is that? Tell us about that, because I think it's interesting when we look at problems.
So solutionism is a term coined by Evgeny Morozov, who's a tech critic. And so he basically is very critical of Silicon Valley culture and ideas. And it's this idea that his book was called "To Save Everything, Click Here," and this idea that we can save everything with a click or with like a computer company, or that there's going to be this like kind of one key thing, like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Obviously, this is the thing that will solve everything. And so that's definitely kind of peddling solutions when it's not actually going to solve anything. So
we're just creating a patch for one thing.
Exactly.
And then there's another thing that pops up. Yeah. So Daisy, what about your view?
I think that, I would like to say I'm the younger generation, but maybe not anymore. But there is, having gone back to university in the UK, it's been really interesting, because I was last there 5 years ago, and to see the change and how a change of something as simple, well, not simple, as huge as fees being reintroduced, or being introduced to a much higher level for UK students, and seeing the difference and how that is going to affect an entire generation moving forward of designers and artists I think, it's terrifying as a system. I think it's a system that is going to fail and is already failing, because you suddenly see a whole group of people whose lives are built on being creative and trying to find ways to innovate in society, and some going into business and running to big fashion houses, or going to research, or going to become artists who then lead the cultural capital of a country. That whole thing is being destroyed, because these maybe are not the people who are going to earn a lot of money doing what they do, but they do things that create value that we measure in other ways. And the metrics we're using to measure those values are probably the wrong metrics. They're taken in economic metrics. How do we measure innovation? Well, it is really economic. Or how do we measure damage to the environment? Well, it's what value have we removed from future generations in terms of economic value of that environmental resource? So unless we actually start thinking about the things that we can't measure in terms of value as part of our future, I think that we're in trouble. And so, I see students much younger than me, and sort of interns who I've had, who are really stuck. Their future is quite bleak going into creative professions, because they're sort of 21, 22, they have huge debt already, they can't take any risks in their future, they need to get a job straight away, or even sort of things like visa policies, students having to leave the UK as soon as they've been educated. Like, the system is set up so that 10, 20 years' time there won't be people to be innovative. And I think that's a really big problem that we face, that is a new problem that we've just made.
Let me follow up on that for just a second. There's an article in the New Yorker that just came out today. It's on Scandinavia, so you might want to read it. It's like, is Scandinavia the solution, right? Because they're actually, yeah. And so what it's saying actually is Scandinavia is actually, and Denmark and Sweden are progressive enough that the government actually is providing enough freedom and liberty in terms of the 480 days of maternity leave and other things, and that are giving comfortable enough environment to young people to be able to also do other things, right? So that's actually interesting, because if you're paying off a loan to college, like half of the American students paying off, you'll take any job. And you'll have to force yourself into jobs that you don't really want to do and into circuits. But to go back, I just wanted to say that the problem is leadership, right? And so if mayors are our leaders for cities, or if presidents are our leaders, right, then they've got to take incredible stands. So there's a mayor called Jaime Lerner from Curitiba, Brazil, small city. It was, 3 to 5 million, but it was growing from 3 to 5 million, and he didn't have enough money. So he said, so what do I have resources? He says he didn't have enough money to pick up the garbage. So he said, but I have bus tickets because I run the bus company. So he exchanged bus tickets for people to bring their garbage bags to a certain location and stuff. So that's pretty innovative, right? But then what I'm maybe my point ultimately in talking about value is, no one told me that I would be able to make a livelihood of going into slums, of working with NGOs, of trying to innovate in that problem. Everyone said, you're crazy, don't go to Venezuela, don't go to Caracas, don't go to the slums, don't go to this and that. But you see, that's the problem, is that if we were able to be comfortable enough or somehow so that we are driven in the areas of our interests.
So there's a connection here to the way we think.
The way we're funding is all
well, everything. But also, if we look at big challenges and we look at these things, it's also connected to, we're schooled into one way of thinking, like we were discussing with Uli and the design thinking, that we're so schooled into to thinking in this linear way that we don't see these things that you're suggesting. So if we are to solve the big challenges of society, how much do we need to open up and completely new ways of thinking?
Maybe one sentence to this, actually, that's my experience with our students is I think we have way too many people who actually don't know what they want to do, you know, because they are trained to do something, because they are trained in a school system, they are earning nice credits and they're earning nice measures and grades. And I have talked to so many students at our place, and yet they get together. So there's business students getting together with tons of other students, very close, and they start working in a project for a semester. And I have seen several people really opening up and saying, "Wow, I'm 24 now, but after this semester, I actually know that I studied the wrong thing." Because I discovered something which is much more interesting and much more suitable to my needs, to my interest. But I was thinking I'm doing the right thing, because all people were clapping on my shoulders and were saying, "Yeah, you're doing great, you have good grades." But I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I have seen a lot of people changing their way, their direction, and doing another PhD in a totally different field. And I think we should definitely really dive deep into our education system. I see the biggest challenge is our education system, which is preparing the people with the wrong mindset for the last century, but not for the current century. And we have to change that. Yeah. We definitely have to change it. And this is the place.
All of you
This
agree?
is the place for Stockholm. This is the place.
Let me just add to that. For instance, so maybe we can't change the education system, but I'll give you one example. Jose Antonio Abreu, Venezuelan youth orchestra. He created the largest youth orchestra movement, of which Dudamel is now the conductor of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and he came out as the genius of the ghetto. All his idea was, give a poor kid an instrument and put him in simple classes. And when he comes home to practice that instrument, the whole household will be transformed. Because the father who was violent, who was drunk, and then listens to Vivaldi or classical music will transform the environment. And it has been amazing success.
So I think that all of these examples kind of show that the solutions or whatever is going to be like, it is a combination of top-down and bottom-up. The top-down layer is the kind of like economic structure. Like, you can't charge people $50,000 a year for college if you expect them to be able to feel freedom to ask different kinds of questions. So you have to have kind of like an infrastructure where people have long maternity leaves and don't have to decide between childcare and working, and you can have more opportunities as a result. And that's a top-down thing, I think, or it has to come from a political system which maybe is agitated bottom-up, but it has to kind of be a system, right? But then I think that gives a framework where a lot of things are going to happen because there's people working together on local problems and to create something new.
And why hasn't it happened? Just to say why it hasn't happened, because we kind of know it, but why hasn't it happened? Because people are apolitical. It's become cool to be apolitical. And so what we have to get is more political and hold accountable those policies above to be changed or whatever.
Marina?
Well, you're asking, are we challenging our challenges properly?
Yeah. Do we need to change our mindset?
I think we shouldn't focus that much on challenging the challenges as we should focus more on defining properly the challenges, because that's the problem here. The reality is growingly complex. There is more and more complexity, and our way of defining our challenges is like a moving target. We keep realizing that we left out something, and we try to bring that into the equation. And speaking of that, the key point is our models, and this is where we are getting into trouble, because we have different models of conceptualizing and operationalizing our reality. We have some models in education, higher education models. We have some models in industry and business. We call them business models. And now there is a growing convergence of business and technology and education models, as we talked earlier. And if you are telling education people about business models and running the universities as a company, they would just simply go through the roof. But there is widely accepted that we need to change our models. And to add another layer, with these revolutions that we were talking earlier, the problem is that all these models that we currently have in place are likely to be blown up and then replaced with something else. So it's part of our incapacity, or sometimes myopia, if you want, of defining proper models.
Maybe we can use a biological metaphor to describe, I think, some of what we've been talking about, which is evolution. And you need variation and you need selection. And that's what innovation is about, too. So you need lots of people trying out different things. And that's where I get excited, about people trying out different things. That's why I tried showing you tons of examples. But then, of course, some of them are not very good or will not succeed. But some will get selected. And some will grow and scale, and maybe you need top-down regulation to do that, or maybe the market will do that, and may the best ideas win. But that's, I think, a good metaphor to think about what we've been talking about.
For that to happen.
And okay, that's a very good point. And these are kinds of places where you can actually accelerate the process of bringing different ideas together for that variation to happen.
But you also have to empower people to feel that they have the freedom to do that. And I think that a lot of people don't feel that freedom.
Well, actually, that's where I probably disagree, because I think increasingly people are empowered. So, for instance, you said people are apolitical, but I've just read about, in Delhi, for instance, this party, which didn't exist as a party until a year ago. It was a citizens' movement, an anti-corruption movement, has now won against an established party in local elections. And then we saw what happened in the Middle East. Now, of course, there was a counter-reaction, and that's where the top-down comes to crush these variations. But, this was bottom-up stuff that happened overnight because people had things like mobile phones and could text each other and just arrive in a central place in large enough numbers to make their voice heard. So I think
Per, you haven't said anything for
people
a long
are empowered.
time.
People are hugely empowered at the
Can I
moment.
add one thing about...
Per, would you like to add something to this? No, are you sure? Okay, Christina, and then Uli, you've been drawing something on the board. I
was inspired by Marina about the models. And,
so can you turn the board around so you show the audience, and we'll see what you've done over there.
Maybe I share a model which helped me, which I came up with while I was thinking about myself, trying to find out why I as a person have so many problems to adapt to this new world. And I started using that model standing in front of my bookshelf and looking at my encyclopedia. My Brockhaus in Germany is the Brockhaus, the most famous one, 170 years old of book. And I was looking at the level of dust on top. And I was asking myself, when did I look at that thing the last time? And I couldn't find out because it was years ago. Because I was using, of course, the networked version of the Brockhaus, the A to Z thing like Wikipedia and Google. And I kept standing in front of the shelf because this structure reminded me to something when I'm talking to CEOs of companies, I ask them, please draw a picture of your structure, of your company, of your organization. They usually end up with we have these 8 departments, and we have the management level here, the C level, and management level 1, and management level 2, and it looks completely like the backwards part of that encyclopedia. So I started thinking, this is an interesting model. This is an interesting model because Brockhaus, the publisher, decided 2014, last year, will be not printed anymore. They stopped the printing. 170 years of continuous printing. So they changed. They were saying, we don't even use the digital version. So and I started defining what we are doing at Potsdam with design thinking. I started designing it like this arrow. I was saying, We are trying to get from here to there. And this is the way, and since we are just here, because this is the way how we structure not only knowledge, but also organizations, obviously. And what is happening with the books of the shelf is right now also happening with all the organizations. They have to completely reorganize. And I haven't found, if you have a better one, please let me know, because I'm actually looking for this kind of new models, and we need to find new ways. And we are not there. We are not in this connected way. We are still not there in the thinking.
But you know, if you actually talk to people in the organization, it looks more like the lower model. And in fact, network theorists have developed these network structures of companies, and they look more like that than they look like that. Exactly. That's the irony. So the actual organization looks more like the lower picture than the upper picture.
Right. And our brain actually looks also more like the lower picture than the upper picture. We don't have drawers.
Christina?
There's actually a funny joke that the network diagrams got to be so popular that somebody did a study that said that network studies and network diagrams follow a power law distribution. Like it was to kind of make a joke that, oh, everything is a network. Oh, isn't it marvelous? Anyway, I wanted to add something to the idea of evolution, because I think you made a really good point that these things do need to have variation and to evolve, in this idea of kind of selection and change and diversity that happen. And that diversity, I think, is actually the most important. Like, there's not going to be one solution to any problem. I think that's sort of the key when we're talking about challenges and challenging them, is that there's not going to be a single thing that we can point to, say, this solved everything, right? That there's going to be many different people and many different things all happening at once. And that, like evolution, technology isn't like teleological. Like, it's not going, it's not always going towards a single point, right? It's branching, and it's going backwards and forwards, and it's falling through this really complex landscape. So I think that's important to not think of things as a linear thing where we're going step by step all together in this system towards the single solution. But yeah, we are branching out into this network.
That's the problem with the progress model, is that it has this linear sort of path to it. And something I've been thinking about a lot is the futures cone, which are people thinking about futures and trying to do scenario planning, kind of obsessed with this cone that has preferable, plausible, and probable futures. And I find it really problematic, although it's really useful as a tool to get people thinking about the future. I mean, it has one vantage point. There's one present, rather than like diverse presents where we're all starting from our very different viewpoints. But it also indicates that there is a goal, that there is somewhere that we want to get to, that is a defined future, and instead we should be thinking about multiple futures and multiple different perspectives, and how do we build a more networked kind of future in that way?
When I often think about people, and we talk about change and all this, and we talk about new ways of doing things, and then when you look at yourself and you look at others, you notice, well, we are creatures of habit. And we tend to do the way we're taught. So how do we break that up? Do you have any good tips for where do you start to sort of open your mind up? What have influenced you?
It was said earlier in the morning, travel. Start to look at the rest of the world and start to get engaged. If you're not thinking global, you're not thinking at all.
Jaideep, you're working with this.
One way that I'm stimulated on a daily basis is by interaction with students. And so they're different from me in many ways. They come from different places. They're younger than me, and they don't have rigid ways of thinking. So yeah, engaging with people who are different, and in my case, particularly younger people, students.
Per?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that opinion from my world in the startup community. And because 15, 20 years ago, you could create something new, a business or something like that, locally in your own country, and do that for some years and roll it out to the next country and do it sort of in a pace. That is totally impossible today, because all innovations exist everywhere, all the time. You're never alone any longer, due to the internet and the globalization. So that at least we discover there's at least 10, 15 exactly the same ideas elsewhere in the world at the same time. So you need to be double quick out there. And so you need to travel, you need to go to the places where the competition and other innovations are. You cannot be in your home country and sit there. So I totally agree with that. Go out there, because then you get you see, it's much bigger than you thought. And things are developing much faster somewhere else, so go there.
And Uli, I know you have a very practical way with your students, right? When they come and they're not, they don't feel comfortable in these teams. What do you do?
Oh, we let them practice, actually, and we let them travel
yeah, but
also.
I mean the physical warm-ups.
There are a lot of things. There are a lot of little things you can do with the students. But the most important thing is that they witness the kind of inability at the beginning and to collaborate and to network and to be actually networked in a network mode, because they all think they are networked with the social networks. But then all of a sudden they witness that it's hard because they're not trained. They're conditioned in a different way. And so what to do? Actually,
why don't you combine the travel with the innovation school and
we do.
Make sure you don't, and because that would look very conventional, big school that you showed there, that big campus, let's say, idea.
Yeah.
Why don't you make the campus the world? You take the students everywhere. You rent little spaces or partners and things, and you a semester going around.
This is actually what they do during the semester. They get the start, they get the challenge, and then they find out the way where they do the research. Mm-hmm. So they travel, and we pay the travel for them. Mm-hmm. But maybe I have a little son, a 6-year-old, and I question myself, how do I prepare this little boy? And you'll have a kid pretty soon. And a lot of you have kids, maybe. What I try to do is go to the school and look at what they're doing with your kids. Because usually what they try to do with your kids is, at the first weeks, they try to make the kids think that your neighbor is your enemy, and the other neighbor as well, because you have to be better than the others. And if you find them doing this with your kid, tell them this is the mode from the 20th century, not the mode we need now. And talk with the teachers how to overcome this and what kind of new models and what kind of new teaching approaches they have. I try to do that with my kid. Because my kid, actually the 6-year-old, and you probably have young kids, if you position them, they are here. They are completely open-minded. They are networking anything. They are combining everything with everything. But imagine, I think the education process is not this direction. The education process, so they start here, but after 10 years, if you let the teachers do, they'll be here again. So this will be my advice.
So we have a few minutes, and I'm a little bit curious if anybody of you in the audience have a question. Wait, so we get you a microphone. We have somebody that can pass that down to you. And then maybe you can stand up and state your name and then ask your question. And if it's addressed to somebody specific in the panel, address it to that person.
Yes, it's a statement rather than a question. Sorry. I'm heard?
Yes.
My name is Jonas Tornblom, and I'm working in the environmental industry. And I think it's very interesting that you, especially when you try to tie city development with innovation, but it is a more complex. We like to see innovation changing also our cities in the world, but the cities are more complex than the industrial world. And I work for a private company because the cities and the complete public sectors have more tasks to fulfill than to just run a business and have a simple target. And there are numerous good examples in cities and public organizations around the world, but the largest problem for innovation is that you cannot learn from cities. No city in the world has as a task to document the processes of best practices in order to teach others. This is not on the agenda of the public services. So the experiences that you do in one city is, if somebody else wants to take it over, they have to start all over again.
Are you talking about environmental projects now, or city planning, or
anything,
everything?
Anything. So there is no proper documentation from cities to learn from. So they often if they get the money, they go and see something, like in San Francisco, and they have to start the process all over again when they come back home. There's just no description, best case.
Sharing information, yeah.
There's no sharing information, and this is sharing information is the basis for innovation. And if we want to change the cities and the public society, we need to to
we
document
need to
and
share the information.
And the processes, yeah.
Actually, I'm not sure if documentation is the right thing, because I think every city has a different culture, and every city has a different structure, and no city can learn exactly the things from the other city. What I think is sharing is very important. So, and looking at actually the activity which is going on and being inspired what other cities are doing and thinking, what could that mean for my city? What could that mean for our system here? What could that mean for our cultural environment? And it's definitely different. This is the advice I'm always asked by companies, the same thing. They're saying, this company did a great innovation thing, but they didn't document it properly, so we can't copy it. And they're saying, yeah, don't try. You have to find it from yourself, out of your own culture.
Jaideep.
But yeah.
So I agree with that. In fact, I'll just go back to the digital green example I gave, where they'll fill the farmer from a particular village talking about something. They'll go to the next community, and they don't just show it to them and say, this is how you should do it. They actually have a discussion, because there can be things that are different, obviously, from, not just physically, but also socially. The social structures may be different. But the fact that there's somebody like them makes a difference, as opposed to somebody who's not like them telling them you should do this. So there's a dynamic where you can share some things, but then there's also a dynamic where they have to discuss amongst themselves what will work and what will not work. And then, of course, they just have to try it. They have to try something, and they might vary the solution again.
Although I'm going to give an example to support that argument in one sense, is that we invented this vertical gym, just putting stacking sports fields, right? And with a running track and whatever, it's a 4,000 square meters of sports on a 20 by 40 court, and it's a steel structure, so it's prefab, it's open source, anyone can have it, right? So we went to the World Bank, and we went to the IDB, Inter-American Development Bank, and we went to all the different corporations, NGOs, Ford Foundation, everyone that we can, and mayors, and it's on the web. You guys can look at vertical. And it hasn't been reproduced anywhere else except for out of Venezuela, where they built a couple of them, right? But somehow it's weird, because it's a perfect device, open source. We're not charging anyone. Any mayor can have it. It goes exactly on the dimension of a playing sports field, a basketball court.
We could even use it in Sweden, maybe.
Yeah, it's where there's density but not enough recreation, right? So. And it hasn't been reproduced anywhere. And I ask myself all the time, is it that it has to come with a check?
Yeah, maybe actually. It's amazing how people value things if there's a price to it. This is what, in development, they found this, that you give away things for free, like the mosquito nets, and then people use them for other things, actually misuse them. They don't use it for the purpose. But if they actually have to pay a small amount, not a lot, for it to actually prevent them from getting malaria, then they will use it for that purpose. There is some logic to charging people for things, a reasonable amount.
Is there a question from anyone else in the audience? Because we're running out of time, so I'm sorry, sir. Anybody else? No? Then I think it's time for me to welcome back OpenLab's director Ivar Björkman to the stage, because we have a special thank you prepared for all of you who've been here today. I can help. I can hold them, maybe.
Thank you so much. I don't know what to say, actually. It has been actually overwhelming to be part of this here today, and I'm saying this true. I don't have the time, of course, to listen to all the speakers, because I have to run all the things. But I think to see all the people and to get a glimpse of what you're saying and hear the response of what people have said during the presentations and the response, and listening to hear the discussion about what we're trying to do here at OpenLab, I think it's fantastic. So I just want to say, so grateful to thank you to have all your panels here with us today, and we will come back next year, or perhaps even sooner, with the same format here to do it. I think it addresses something that is lacking in not only in Sweden, not only in Stockholm, but other places too. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone.